everyone, I'm Dr. Christy Pretti-Frontczak, and this is another in our Q&A series where you ask a question and I give an answer. And this is part of a series that is for ECE Solutionary members. The video goes live and is available to everyone for a short period of time, and then it's archived in our members-only library. So in part one of this series, we talked about the first several steps in the process. And so we started with the question of, do you have a strong relationship with the child? From there, if we answered yes, we said, do you have the right mindset? Again, if you said yes again, you went to the third step. Can you recognize and reduce the stressors that impact the child? Yes again, that takes us to number 4. Is the child in the green zone of optimal learning? This is necessary because we need to be in the green zone before we can begin teaching. If the answer is yes, we move to step 5. Do you know what to teach? This is where we started talking a little bit about different types of outcomes, common, targeted, and individualized. And if we said yes, we know what we're teaching, we said, is that a common outcome? And then in part 1, we dove deep into how would we then tier instruction to teach that common outcome and help a child stay in the green zone. In part 2, we're going to take a quick sidestep and we're going to actually answer no to the question of, is what are you teaching a common outcome? So here at step 6, if we want to know what to do if we're teaching a common outcome, we stay with part 1 of the series. If we're going to take a sidestep, we're going to answer, no, we are not teaching a common outcome. Then the next sidestep question is what you're teaching an IEP, an individualized education plan? Now, this is important because some children may need individualized outcomes, but they may not be IEP worthy. So we want to make it sure at this point we know if we're going to be adhering to the federal, state, and local rules and policies around individualized education plan goals. And so if we say, yes, this is an IEP outcome, then we're going to do a sidestep of whether or not that is an IEP worthy outcome. And then we'll go through the same process we went in part 1 by determining how to create tiered and differentiated instruction for IEP-worthy outcomes for children. So at step 6, I asked you, are you teaching a common outcome? And sometimes the answer to that is no, and not in a bad way. It just means that we're doing tiered instruction. We're changing what we're teaching different children, perhaps even in the same activity. So I said to you, are you teaching a common outcome, something that all children of a certain age and grade are learning? If you answer no, I'm going to next ask you as a sidestep, are you teaching an IEP goal? Now, this might not be IEP if you don't have individualized education plans. Think of it more as individualized. It's something unique and special just for this child. Unique and special meaning something that they missed in earlier development. Maybe it's a foundational prerequisite skill that for whatever reason they have not acquired or can't do consistently, whereas other children of the same age or grade can. So this is something very early in development, something very early in the learning phases of those trajectories. There's another question that's the sidestep here, which is sidestep 8. Is it IEP worthy? So IEP worthy for me is, does it increase the child's access, participation, and are they going to make progress towards those common outcomes? By learning this IEP outcome, will it increase this child's ability to access, participate, and make progress towards that common outcome? If you answer yes, then you have found an IEP worthy goal that is now ready for instruction. Sidestep, we figured, wow, they're really missing a very foundational or prerequisite. They're really working on orienting away from stressors. So we've talked a little bit about your role in reducing, but what we really want is humans to be able to reduce those stressors themselves. And a very early way that humans do that is to turn away from, to shut down from, in some way, the things that are hyper or hypo arousing them. We also want them to use self self-soothing strategies when they start feeling themselves. We sometimes think of this as putting the brakes on. When I'm starting to be hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused, how do I put the brakes on? What kind of self-soothing things can I do? Now, depending on the age and the ability of the child, they may really require a lot of this to be done through co-regulation, because remember, we're externally regulated before we're self-regulated. Now you're like, why are we all of a sudden talking about regulation? I thought we were working on a literacy outcome. Well, keep in mind that as you think about why is a child struggling, what is an IEP-worthy outcome, the further we get away from the common outcome. So the common outcome is this retell, thinking about details, the familiar stories. Some children may struggle because of the concurrent skill of self-regulation, which is this conscious ability to stop, think, and act. And in order to really build those self-regulation skills, whether they're attention or interaction or regulation or problem solving or recall, children may need to do something that is foundational or prerequisite that is something like just orienting away from stressors, just being able to maybe through eye gaze select a self-soothing strategy. So as you look at this triangle, you can see the layering. All children, including children with significant differences in their ability, are going to be in those routine, planned, and child-initiated activities. So let's say that we have a child that has cerebral palsy and is in a wheelchair and uses eye gaze as their means of communication, their primary way. They also use a lot of sounds, maybe even crying, that tells you what they need or what they might want. And so you might say, wow, this little 5-year-old is really far away from being able to retell familiar stories and including key details. However, they're still involved in and participating in that small group peer-to-peer reading activity. They're still at snack or at lunch, and they're still participating in choice activities and play. But in those activities, we focus less on giving the child an opportunity or even the means to retell something. So let's say you're saying, well, the child uses eye gaze, or they can orient their body to something in the story and answer questions about who was a key figure or what happened. Perhaps. But if you've gone all the way through and you've said, no, Christy, what I'm teaching this child is actually an IEP-worthy goal, then we don't want to create embedded learning opportunities for that child that are around the common outcome. By being included and by being a part of those activities, they will still be exposed to retell stories, key details. They will even be exposed to opportunities to see how people learn the conscious ability to stop, think, and act. But what we're going to create embedded learning opportunities around centers on their skill, their outcome, their IEP goal of being able to orient away from stressors. That's creating self-awareness, and to use self-soothing strategies. We're going to have to help the child learn the skills that they need to be able to be self-aware, to orient their body, and to choose which self-soothing strategy they can actually enact. Again, if the child has cerebral palsy, they may have limited mobility, and so they may only be able to tell you what they want that would help them self-soothe. So again, back to if they're using eye gazes or crying or some sort of sound or approximation, we want them to be able to use those as a way to orient their attention away from stressors, or to tell us, hey, I need you to do something on my behalf so that I am soothed. Again, through eye gaze or some other mode of communication, telling us that they want us to put noise canceling headphones on so that that is a way that they would self-soothe. Maybe they even want sunglasses on to reduce the input that they have visually or the brightness. Maybe they would like to take a stroll around the room. So again, if they're in a wheelchair, a peer can maybe go walk around the room with them, and that just sort of lets them self-soothe, or walk over to a window with the peer, pushing them in the wheelchair and be able to look out at nature. So again, depending on their communication and their cognition, there's some way they can say, this is too much. I need you to slow down in some way. And so on their visual chart where they're doing eye gazes, or if they're picking between two things, you could be like, do you want me to speed up or do you want to slow down? And if the child understands those concepts, we're giving them a way to say, if you would slow down, that would make me feel better. And then I can go along with whatever it is we're doing. Maybe they make a request to have a body part rubbed or patted. So maybe their hands massaged, maybe their head massaged, maybe even their feet massaged. Maybe they want to say to you, whoo, this is too much. The size of this group is too much. You have 2 peers reading with me. And we're reading next to another pair and another pair and another pair who are all in this classroom. It's just too much. Can you reduce the size of the group? So maybe one of the peers goes and reads someplace else, but another child sits and reads with me. And again, keep in mind, these are not so that you can read together, quote unquote, but rather that the child's having the opportunity to notice that they're becoming hyper or hypo aroused, and they can communicate to you or on their own a way to self-soothe. They could even say, I need some movement. Now again, this might be a child who can't move their own body, but they could say, could you move me? Can you move me out of my chair? Can you put me in a stander? Can you put me back in the chair? Can you put me down on the ground so that I can move a little bit? Can you do leg pumps? Can you stretch my arms? Can you stretch my neck? These are things that you can give a child a choice to say to you, I'm getting hyper or hypo aroused. Here's from my choice of 2 or 3 or 5, or if I have a huge communication device where I can do eye gaze, I can tell you which thing would soothe my system. So that's a long way to say that when we've sidestepped, we've actually thought about what is IEP worthy. We're no longer focusing our instructional trials or our embedded learning opportunities on the common outcome, maybe not even that messy middle of all of self-regulation. We're peeling it back to the child's IEP worthy goal and giving them at their level, because remember, we have a relationship with them. We know what their stressors are. We know what we're teaching. We know how to keep them in the green zone. We know development. All of that goodness we've answered yes to. This becomes very straightforward so that we're able to make it all the way say, yep, you are in the green zone. I'm here with you and I'm teaching your IEP worthy outcome.